Why is a guy that has no education about education in education? That's a good question. And I'm kind of glad, I'm kind of glad I didn't, because I started with a fresh slate, like an empty mind about this subject. Well, my mind's pretty empty about a lot of subjects. But, so I want to tell you a story about faith on one hand, and on the other hand, passion, persistence, and patience. And I'm running out of the last one. So here's what's going on. I was a software guy. By the way, what is a software guy doing in software who knows nothing about software? So there's a pattern in my life. Back in the 80s, I had a software company. And in the early 90s, our company made what's called the Inc. 500. That's the 500 fastest growing companies. And I always tell people it's not that hard if you start like really low. So a 987% growth rate in 5 years isn't that great when you start really low. So I was at this conference in Des Moines, Iowa in 1991. And I was feeling pretty good. My wife was with me, and there was a speaker that night. His name was Steve Mariotti. He's the founder of the National Foundation for Teaching Entrepreneurship. And he had on the stage with him about 4 low-income kids from inner city. And he was talking about teaching kids about entrepreneurship, and these kids were talking about their business plans. And I said to my wife, man, if I didn't have the software company, I'd like to do what he's doing. So 5 years later, in 1997, I'm at another conference with my wife, Peg, and up on the stage is Steve Mariotti with about 10 kids talking about their business plans and how entrepreneurship has made a difference in their lives. So I said to my wife, if I didn't have this software company, I would like to do what he's doing. So in 1997, between 97 and 98, it was a really hard time for our company. And those of you that have had businesses, maybe you know that sometimes you're the last one paid, or maybe you're not paid at all. And this was a time when we were going through a software changeover from, were you guys even born then? I guess you were. From DOS to Windows. You ever hear that? And man, the rule of threes kicked in. I got this rule of threes that I teach kids. Everything is going to take 3 times as long as you think it is. And it's going to cost you 3 times as much. And you're going to get about 1/3 the sales you thought you were going to get. And if your business plan works under those conditions, you probably got a winner. But I didn't know that then. I learned it because of my own mistake. So anyway, I was going through the year, and my net worth was going down, 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 to the point of, if I kept on that trajectory, I would be personally bankrupt. And we'd been doing business with a company called Xerox. And on March 10th, 1998, at 5:03 p.m., at 1300 East 9th Street on the 13th floor, I sold my company to Xerox. And a wire transfer went through. And I said, why? Why does a guy who's almost bankrupt get a windfall? So I had to stay with Xerox for a few years. That's called the hangover period, because that's what it feels like. And I was down at a conference in Florida in April of 2000. I was 45 years old, and I'm sitting at the pool. Somebody says, what are you doing here? I said, I'm at a conference for CEOs who don't know what to do with the rest of their life. So he handed me this book called Halftime by Bob Buford. Halftime. First half of our lives, we strive for success. The second half of our lives, we strive for significance. So I read the book. I went to dinner that night at the banquet, the keynote speaker was Steve. And after the speech, and my wife wasn't there, so I couldn't turn to her and say, So I said to myself, I'm going to do what he's doing, So I went up to him afterwards. You know how people go up, talk to a speaker afterwards, and they all wait in line? And so I got my turn. I said, hey, Steve, I'm John, I want to do what you're doing. He goes, well, where do you live? Cleveland. He says, go ahead and do it in Cleveland. We don't have anything there. And then he goes on to the next person. And so I said, he wants me to do it in Cleveland. So I went home, and I didn't know anybody in Cleveland, except for one person who went to my church, Steve Minter. And I said to Steve, I want to start this nonprofit, do what Nifty's doing. He goes, all right, we'll come down to the Cleveland Foundation. I'll introduce you to a couple of people. And I wish I had a wall that started with Steve Minter and then had connections to it. So my database went from 1 to 5,823 right now. And, okay, so fast forward a little bit. So we started this thing called eCity, Entrepreneurship, Connecting, Inspiring, and Teaching Youth. And we started teaching kids in Cleveland schools. And this is the wake-up call. I was 45 years old and never set foot in an urban school in my life. How embarrassed am I to say that? Yet I was in these schools trying to teach kids about entrepreneurship. And we were doing okay. And I went to one school one afternoon, and in the school, there were supposed to be 12 kids and a teacher, and there were 3 kids and no teacher. And I said, man, if the Gunn Foundation knew that the $15,000 they gave me for this class was being spent this way, they'd never talk to me again. So I talked to my buddy, Scott Arthur, who was with me, and I said, Scott, we have to do something different. What if we could start a school where we could have these kids 8 hours a day for 5 years or 4 years, and, maybe we can make a difference. And Scott goes, great idea. What do you know about schools? I said, I don't know anything about it. What do you know? He goes, nothing. I said, good, let's get going. So that was November of 2004. I happened to have an appointment with Barbara Bird Bennett, the then superintendent of the school, CEO of the schools. I said to Barbara, let's start a school together called Entrepreneurship High School. She says, great, do it as a charter school. We'll be your sponsor. I said, what's a charter school? She goes, you don't have any bureaucracy and you can do it your way. I said, okay. So I asked my friends about charter schools. They said, oh, those are the ones that steal money from the public schools. They take the best kids. They're not held accountable, and they're all for profit, and it's a ripoff. So I said, no, sounds pretty good. Anyway, I didn't know anything about charter schools, so I would do what you do if you don't know about something. You get on the computer and you? Right. So I Googled excellent urban charter schools, figuring there's got to be one, and if I could find it, I'll copy it. So I Googled it. And up came this group called Building Excellent Schools in Boston. And Building Excellent Schools, the homepage says, we teach urban charter school founders how to build great schools. Great. Called them, said, I want to start a school. Traveled to Boston. She said, if you're interested in this, travel around these 12 schools on the East Coast and learn. I said, okay. So I visited 12 schools on the East Coast, and what I saw was phenomenal work being done at Boston Collegiate, Boston Prep, Roxbury Prep, North Star Academy, KIPP. And I said, we can do that. We can do that in Cleveland. So came back to Cleveland. Started talking about it, started saying we're going to start a school where all kids are going to go to college, 100% college bound, and we're going to take the schools that we saw in the East, and we're going to put them here. And we hired a head of school who went and studied for 1 year at Building Excellent Schools. And while he was doing that, I was here in Cleveland trying to raise a couple of bucks and find a place to put the school. First location for the school was in the Shorebank building on East 105th, on the 4th floor of an old warehouse. So our head of school graduated from Building Excellent Schools in June of 2006. We opened the school in August of 2006 with 125 sixth graders. And we've been doing this for 5 years at E-Prep School, Entrepreneurship Prep School. And I would say that we're among the top middle schools in the entire county, A couple of years ago, our 8th graders read 98% proficient, which beat every school in Cuyahoga County, even Chagrin Falls, So then we said, well, we can take 6th graders who are 3 years behind, or 4, or 5. This year we took in 20 6th graders at a 1st grade reading level. How does that happen? How does that happen? Where a district can continually promote kids that are not ready to be promoted. So our job is to take 6th graders, 3, 4, 5 years behind, get them up to 7th, 8th grade, 9th grade, and then put them out in high-performing college prep high schools. So that's what we do. And then we just started Village Prep, which is a kindergarten through 5th grade program, hoping that, we could take kids early enough, catch them up. So we have a track record. We're doing it. We are now combining with the intergenerational school, Citizens Academy, created something called Breakthrough Charter Schools. Breakthrough Charter Schools, a nonprofit. The vision, 20 schools by 2020, serving 7,000 kids. That'll represent 20% of the K through 8th graders in Cleveland. That's what we want to do. So here's the problem. and I'll take the last 4 minutes and 5 seconds to tell you about this. The way charter schools are funded in the state is discriminatory. We get 1/3 less than district public schools, many of which are failing. 15% of the district schools in this city are high-achieving schools. 40% of the charter schools are high-achieving schools. But we get 1/3 less funding. It doesn't work. And then I just found out yesterday that despite the good comments from the administration in Columbus about charters and so forth, but the reality is next year, probably E-Prep. By the way, we have to raise $1 million a year in philanthropy just to supplement public money. And we just found out yesterday by looking at the budget that will increase, that philanthropy need will increase by 50%. How? It can't do it. 20 schools by 2020 with that kind of... So we have to change that law. We have to change the law. The charter schools get federal and state funding, which is both down, and 0 property tax. The district schools get federal, state, and property tax. We're going to change that law. If this is something that intrigues you, or if you want to learn more about it, in about 1 minute and 30 seconds, my email address will appear above. I hope you're enjoying these pictures, by the way. These are our kids. Everybody's dressed in a jacket and tie. And soon we're going to have a 3-minute, powerful PSA that we're going to try to get viral. I'll send it to Hallie. Maybe she can push it out to all of you. 3 minutes featuring our kids and some parents talking about how schools like this are needed all over Cleveland and all over the country. And the last message says, fix this funding. And if we can get that out there and we can talk to every legislator on both sides of the aisle, I think we can make a difference and fix education in Cleveland. 20 schools by 2020, 7,000 kids, and then make sure they all get into high school and all go to college and all graduate from college. So let's change that statistic that out of 100 ninth graders in Cleveland, only 4 will graduate from college. Out of 100 ninth graders in Cleveland, I should be hearing like, let's try it again. Out of 100 ninth graders in Cleveland, only 4 will graduate from college. Much better. Why can't we tell this kid right up here, this little kindergarten scholar, when she comes into our building, she belongs to a classroom named after Georgetown. And this one is in Ohio State. And the next one is in Cornell. And so when you ask the kindergartners, where are you going to go to college? Guess what they say? Cornell, Ohio State, Miami. Every one of these scholars thinks they're going to get to go to college, and they will. There's the bell. Thanks.